The sterile, fluorescent-lit halls of St. Jude's Hospital hummed with the usual mix of hurried footsteps and muffled conversations. But for one man, the rhythm of this place was unfamiliar, disconcerting. Marcus Jenkins lay in a dimly lit corner of the emergency room, his body racked with pain. His breath came in shallow, rasping gasps as he clutched his chest. Around him, nurses rushed past, attending to patients with varying degrees of urgency. But for Marcus, time seemed to have slowed to a painful crawl. "Sir, we'll get to you as soon as we can," a passing nurse offered, her voice polite but strained. Marcus tried to nod, but the agony gripping his body made even the slightest movement excruciating. He felt forgotten, a sentiment that was becoming all too familiar lately. It had started earlier that evening. A sharp, stabbing pain had pierced his chest while he was at home alone. Clutching at his heart as if he could hold back the pain with sheer force of will. In a haze of agony, he'd managed to dial 911, the dispatcher's voice a distant lifeline as he fought to stay conscious. Now, lying on the narrow hospital bed, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was slipping away. Minutes stretched into eternity, each heartbeat a painful reminder of his mortality. "Excuse me," he managed to croak as a passing doctor caught his eye. The doctor paused, glancing at the chart in his hand. "Mr. Jenkins, we'll be with you shortly. Just hang in there." The words offered little comfort as Marcus watched the doctor disappear down the hall. His thoughts drifted to his life, to the moments that had brought him here. Growing up in the city, Marcus had learned early on the realities of being a black man in America. The sideways glances, the whispered judgments, it was a weight he'd carried all his life. But nothing could have prepared him for the sheer injustice of this moment. As the minutes turned into an hour, Marcus felt the creeping tendrils of fear wrap around his heart. Had they forgotten about him? Was this it, then? Left to die alone in a hospital bed because he wasn't a priority. His mind wandered to his daughter Maya. She was the light of his life, her laughter a balm to his weary soul. The thought of leaving her behind, of not being there to see her grow up, was unbearable. Just as despair threatened to consume him, a new figure appeared at his bedside. It was Dr. Rachel Bennett, her expression one of controlled urgency. "Mr. Jenkins, I'm so sorry for the delay," she said, her voice sincere. It was Dr. Rachel Bennett, her expression one of controlled urgency. Here was a woman who understood, who saw him not as a statistic but as a human being in pain. But the look in Dr. Bennett's eyes stopped him short. Without another word, Dr. Bennett sprang into action. Nurses materialized at her command, their movements a synchronized ballet of efficiency. Marcus could only watch in awe as they worked to stabilize him, their voices a steady murmur of reassurance. It was a blur of activity, 4 lines, monitors beeping, the cold sting of medication coursing through his veins. But through it all, Marcus clung to the flicker of hope that burned bright within him. Hours passed in a haze, the line between consciousness and unconsciousness blurring. But finally, blessedly, the pain began to recede. Marcus felt the weight of exhaustion settle over him like a blanket as he drifted into a restless sleep. When he awoke, it was to the soft glow of morning filtering through the hospital window. Dr. Bennett stood at his bedside, her expression one of quiet relief. "You're going to be okay, Mr. Jenkins," she said, her voice steady. As he lay there, basking in the warmth of the morning sun, Marcus knew that this was a second chance. A chance to fight, not just for himself, but for all those who had been forgotten, left behind by a system that should have protected them. And as he looked into Dr. Bennett's eyes, he saw a partner in that fight. A woman who refused to let him become just another statistic, another name lost in the shuffle. With a renewed sense of purpose, Marcus Jenkins vowed to make every moment count. for himself, for Maya, and for all those who had been left behind. The forgotten hour in that hospital bed had changed him, transformed him into a warrior against injustice. And as he took Dr. Bennett's outstretched hand, he knew that together, they would make a difference. Days turned into weeks, and Marcus Jenkins found himself on a path he never could have anticipated. The ordeal in the hospital had ignited a fire within him, a determination to shine a light on the injustices that had nearly cost him his life. With Dr. Rachel Bennett by his side, Marcus embarked on a mission to bring attention to the disparities in healthcare, particularly for marginalized communities. They organized rallies, spoke at community events, and reached out to local lawmakers, demanding change. Their efforts did not go unnoticed. The local news picked up their story, shining a spotlight on the systemic issues that had led to Marcus being left in agony for hours. People from all walks of life rallied behind them, their voices united in a chorus of outrage and demand for reform. Through it all, Marcus never forgot the reason for his fight, his daughter, Maya. She was his inspiration, the driving force behind every speech, every protest, every late-night planning session. One evening, Maya came up beside him, her eyes wide with curiosity. She was his inspiration, the driving force behind every speech, every protest, every late-night planning session. Marcus looked down at her, his heart swelling with love. He pulled her onto his lap, enveloping her in a hug. "I'm busy because I want to make the world a better place for you, sweetheart," he said, his voice choked with emotion. Maya looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. "Will it be better soon?" Marcus smiled, a bittersweet mixture of hope and determination. "Yes, baby girl. We're going to make sure of it." And make sure of it they did. In the months that followed, Marcus and Dr. Bennett's advocacy efforts bore fruit. New protocols were put in place at St. Jude's Hospital to ensure that no patient would ever be left waiting in agony again. Community programs were launched to provide better access to healthcare for underserved neighborhoods. And Marcus became a symbol of resilience and hope for those who had felt forgotten. Years passed, and the fight for equality continued. He knew that the road ahead would be long and challenging, but with Maya by his side, and with the unwavering support of Dr. Bennett and their community, he was ready for whatever lay ahead. The forgotten hour in that hospital bed had changed Marcus in ways he could have never imagined. It had given him a purpose, a mission, to make sure that no one else would suffer the same injustice he had endured. As he looked out at the city skyline from the window of his office, Marcus felt a sense of peace settle over him. The fight was far from over, but he was exactly where he needed to be. With a smile on his face and Maya's laughter echoing in his heart, Marcus Jenkins leaned back in his chair, ready to continue the fight for a better tomorrow.